The Wonderful Lamp. Ordinary readers have always associated the tale of Aladdin and the Wonderful Lamp with the Arabian Nights. Scholars, who could not find it in any version known to them, accused the French translator Galland of making it up himself and passing it off as an Eastern story. They were far too hasty. It has, since the 18th century, been found in Oriental manuscripts of South India and Burma and in Albania. It exists in the oral literature of the Mongolians, in Greek and in Czech. Ms. M. H. Burke took the following oral version from the lips of an almost illiterate woman in Rome, where it may have been current for centuries. One day, a kindly-looking old man knocked at the door of a poor tailor's house. His small son opened the door, and the visitor said that he was his uncle, and gave the lad a coin to buy himself a meal. Now the tailor, who was out of work, was away at the time, but later he came home and was rather surprised to find the guest calling him his brother. Still, as he seemed to be rich, he did not feel inclined to object too strongly. The newcomer spent some time with the family, spending liberally on their upkeep, but finally said that he had to leave, and wanted to take the boy, Cajoux, with him, so that he might learn something and so become a businessman. Of course, the tailor agreed. As soon as they had left the town, however, the man said, "I am not really your uncle at all. I need a strong lad to perform a task which I am too old to complete. I am a magician. Now, don't try to get away. You cannot." Cajoux was not particularly alarmed, and asked the wizard what he had to do. The man took up a stone slab from the ground, and told the boy that he had to go down into the earth. "When you get to the bottom of the cave, continue along until you come to a beautiful garden, where you will find a fierce dog keeping guard. Give him this bread. Do not on any account look back if you hear any noise behind you. You will see an ancient lamp on a shelf. Take it down and bring it back to me." Then the wizard gave Cajoux a ring. "If anything happens," he said, "rub the ring and wish to be saved from it." Cajoux duly made his way underground, where he found all kinds of amazing things. Precious jewels hung like fruit from trees, and he picked many and filled his pockets with them. When he got back to the entrance of the cave, the old man asked him to hand up the lamp. "Not until you have pulled me up," said Cajoux, fearful that he might be left behind on his own. The magician, to frighten Cajoux, dropped the stone slab back into the cave's entrance. But Cajoux simply rubbed his ring, and an apparition manifested itself. "Bring food for supper," cried Cajoux. He also ordered his parents to be brought to him, so they all had a wonderful meal. Cajoux returned to his home. Some time later, he heard that the town was to be illuminated to celebrate the wedding of the Sultan's daughter to the son of the chief minister. He had an idea. "Mother," he said, "I want to marry the princess. Take this basket of priceless jewels to the Sultan and say that we ask for his daughter in marriage." The old woman did as she was bid, and the Sultan was truly astonished when he saw that the jewels were more precious than anything which he had in his own treasury. He promised to give his answer at the end of a month. It was so arranged, however, that the princess and the minister's son were married within the week. Cajoux rubbed the magic lamp and said, "Tonight, go and take away the daughter of the Sultan and place her on a mattress of straw in our outhouse." When the princess appeared on the palliasse, Cajoux placed a naked sword between them in token of the purity of his intentions, and lay beside her, wanting to talk. But the princess, not unnaturally, was far too afraid of him to reply. Cajoux had the princess carried 3 times, one night after another, to his home, and the girl told her mother about it, unable to understand what was happening. The queen told the sultan, and he was just as puzzled. And the minister's son complained to his father that his bride kept disappearing when night fell, and returned in some inexplicable way at dawn. Kajus sent his mother to the sultan again, this time with 3 baskets of priceless gems, asking if he could be allowed to see the princess. "Very well," said the sultan. "He may come to the palace." As soon as he heard that he was to be received by the royal family, Kajus rubbed his magical ring and caused magnificent robes of gold and silver to be brought, together with a beautiful horse and attendants, who walked ahead of him, strewing money and crying, "Make way for Signor Kajus." The princess obtained her liberty from the minister's son, and she and Kajus were married. But the wizard, of course, heard about Kajus' successes, and he decided to get hold of the magical lamp. Dressing himself as a peddler, he stood outside Kajus' house, calling out, "Old lamps taken and new ones given for them." Kajus was not at home, and the princess sent out the ancient lamp in the hands of a servant, which the magician exchanged for a new one. Then he rubbed the lamp and caused the palace to be borne away by magic to an island somewhere in the remote seas. When Kajus arrived home, he realized what had happened, and rubbed his magical ring, which never left his finger, asking to be carried by the slave of the ring to where the palace was now located. When he got there, Kajus blew his horn outside the window of his wife, and she rushed to it to assure him that she would refuse the magician's attempts to make her his wife. Kajus advised her, "Arrange a feast tonight. Tell the magician that you will marry him only if he will tell you what thing would be deadly for him, so that you can protect him against it." Sure enough, there was such a secret, and during the feast the wizard confided it to the lady. "In a faraway forest," he said, "there is a beast called a hydra, which has 7 heads. Someone desiring my death would have to go there, find the animal, and cut off his 7 heads. When the middle head is split open, a young hare will leap forth and run away. If the hare's head is split open, a bird will fly out. If the bird is caught and split open, a precious stone will be found in his body. If that stone is placed under my pillow, I shall die." Now, of course, Kajus knew what to do. He travelled to the forest and found the hydra, which he killed. When he split its middle head, the hare jumped out. Kajus caught the hare and cut its head open. Out flew the bird. He managed to catch the bird and open it up. Inside was the stone, which Kajus hastened to take to the princess, together with a bottle of opium. In the evening, the girl slipped some of the drug into the magician's wine, and he fell into a deep sleep. As soon as the stone was placed under his pillow, he uttered 3 terrible cries, turned around 3 times, and died. Now that the awful sorcerer was dead, Kajus and his wife, by means of their magical things, had the palace returned to where it had been before, and lived happily ever afterwards. Who was the most generous? The kind of tale which was enjoyed in Europe about 600 years ago is that of the freeholder, the franklin, in Chaucer's The Canterbury Tales. Like the Italian Boccaccio, whose 100 tales were published when Chaucer was a child, Chaucer incorporated this tale of effort and generosity plus romance into his stories. These were supposedly told by a group of people to each other to pass the time. The theme of the lady who is reluctant to yield to a suitor and who therefore sets him tests, which may or may not be successfully carried out, seems to have been of abiding interest to all kinds of writers and readers in the past. On this theme, numerous ancient Hindu storytellers contrived to make the would-be lover ashamed, so do the Arabians. The Persians have the husband test his wife, and she turns the tables on him. In an English story of 1430, The Lady Prioress and Her Three Wooers, the devout lady punishes a knight, a priest, and a merchant, who all have designs on her chastity. An unexpected twist occurs in the story of The Lady of Antwerp. She sets tests for 3 lovers, and herself dies in the end. Chaucer's Franklin's Tale covers much of the same ground, but it introduces the question of chivalry, and gives an insight into what must have been the way of thinking of those remote times, from the pen of the first writer of relatively modern English. It certainly is unusual to find the husband, the wife, and the lover, and his accomplice all tied for the accolade of generosity, and the moral left open for the reader. Once there was a noble cavalier who loved a beautiful lady. After he married her, another cavalier courted her secretly, which she abominated, but she dared not tell her husband of the intrigue, lest there be bloodshed. Tarolfo, the second nobleman, troubled her so much by letters, flowers, and small gifts of love, that the lady told him she must see him. He arrived at a hidden bower, feeling that he must surely have won her. But he was in for a surprise. "My good sir," said she, "there is only one situation in which we can be lovers, when my garden shall bloom in cold January with the flowers of mild June." "I swear that I shall not rest until I have learned how this can be done, dear lady," said he, leaving with his head high. "That shall never be," said she, and went to her boudoir, secure in the belief that she would not see him again. But Tarolfo went to Thessaly, where he chanced upon an ancient man gathering herbs in a dark wood. "What do you do, sir?" he asked the old man, and the answer was, "I am collecting for physic. Who are you, and what do you here?" "I am from the farthest west. I grieve over a most hopeless position, yet I have still hope, for the prize is very great," said Tarolfo. The old man, who was called Tabano, said, "I will help you if you tell me what it is that you have to do." The cavalier told him, "I must make a garden blossom in January with all the flowers of summer." "It can be done," said the old man. "Do you not know this is an uncanny place you have come to?" "God will protect me," said the nobleman. "Do not judge me by my outside appearance. I can do anything that is required, if the payment is right. What will you give me if I perform this service for you?" "You shall have half of whatever I own, half of my horses, half of my sheep, treasure, and houses," promised Tarolfo, so eager was he to gain the love of the lady. The magician agreed, and they went to the garden in January on the night of a full moon. With mystic movements and strange utterances, the old man cavorted around the garden. By dawn everything was in flower as if it were midsummer. Roses and fair blossoms were everywhere. "By my faith," cried the lady upon rising, "the garden is blooming with every flower of summer. I am undone." Soon a message came from her would-be lover, requesting that she give him a time when they could be together, as he had fulfilled her condition. Nearly out of her mind with distress, she sent him a letter to say that she must wait until her husband was away from home. Now her husband, loving her much, noticed that she neither smiled nor ate for the space of a week, and questioned her. "Is it your health, my love, or your mind?" he asked anxiously. Unable to bear the shame, she told him everything, and waited for his condemnation. It did not come. Instead, he said gravely, You made a promise, even though it was a rash one, but as you are bound by your word, you must keep it. You should go to him, but, my dear, do not in future make any promise such as this, even though it does seem impossible." "You mean I should let him enjoy me as he wishes?" she cried. "Yes," said he. "Tirolfo has earned his reward. He has kept his word. Now you must do so." With her maidens around her, she sadly went to meet the cavalier at the appointed place. All adorned she went, yet her heart was heavy, and she dreaded his approach. "Does your husband know?" was his first question. "Yes, he sent me to you so that I should keep my word," she replied. Tirolfo thought for a moment, then he said, "Please, return to your husband. He is so generous a man that I cannot take what is rightfully his." A look of shame came to his face. "Beg him to forgive me. I will never do anything so ignoble as this again." She thanked him and returned to her husband full of joy. Her lesson had been hard, but she had learned it. Now the magician, when Tirolfo went to him and said, "Come, take your half of my possessions," was not pleased. "I cannot take payment for what has not been a successful enterprise," he said, shaking his head. "I have a pride in my work. After all, am I not a craftsman just as any carpenter or builder is? The gods forbid that I should be less generous than the husband has been." And he disappeared before Tirolfo's very eyes. Now, which of the three was the most generous? Cupid and Psyche. The strange fascination of legends in which people turn into animals, or the other way about, have given us both Beauty and the Beast and the Frog Prince. The forbidden, the taboo of looking or of knowing something before due time, is usually integral with the legend, found all over Europe and in Asia. Thomas H. Moore has collected a version from Chile. Sometimes, as in Indian tales, the lady is an enchanted snake. In Norway, the girl is married to a white bear. Elsewhere, she may have a magical bird costume which effects the transformation. Some scholars think that the whole idea is derived from ancient Egypt and alludes to the metamorphosis of the butterfly, Aurelia, and hence is a parable of the ascent of the human soul. One of the most distinguished versions of the legend is this one, from Apuleius's The Golden Ass of the 2nd century AD. Once upon a time there was a great king who had 3 fair daughters, and they were so beautiful that from many lands suitors came to seek their hands in marriage. The youngest was the loveliest of all, so that people said that she was like the goddess Aphrodite, and they bowed low as she passed through the streets of the city. Now it was not long since Paris had given the goddess Aphrodite the apple for being the fairest of all the goddesses, and she was jealous. She summoned her son Cupid and said to him, "Come, let us fly together to see this mortal maiden whom men say is the image of me." They reached the palace where Psyche was sleeping, and when his mother showed the girl to him, she said to him, "Prick her with one of the arrows of love, so that she will feel the deepest affection for one of the basest of mortal men. Avenge me, my son." Then she departed. Cupid, however, gazing upon the girl, was stricken with pity, and said, "I will never do so much wrong as to mate you with some wretch not good enough for you. You are safe from my darts." And he flew away. Now, though all men bowed down before Psyche, none dared marry her, for she seemed too good and pure. So while her sisters married and had husbands whom they loved, Psyche remained untouched and unsought. When she had reached the age when Greek maidens should be wed, the king grew anxious and went to consult the oracle. When he returned with ashen face, his queen asked him what had been the oracle's answer. "Psyche must be left on a desolate mountainside until some monster comes to devour her," said the king. "Men have paid her honors only reserved for the gods, and the gods require vengeance." The queen and her maidens wept and wailed, but Psyche remained calm. At last a white-clad priest came to tell the king he must tarry no longer. Soon a procession, each person clad in black, left the city, Psyche led by her father and mother, and singers sang a mournful dirge. The sun was rising when they reached a bare rock, and here it was that the oracle had directed Psyche should be left to perish. When for the last time her parents took her in their arms, Psyche never shed a tear in farewell. After all, what good was it to mourn, when it was surely all the will of the gods? Not daring to look back, in case they should see the dreadful monster actually devouring their daughter, the king and queen went away with their retainers. Psyche was very tired, for she had walked a long way, so she leaned wearily against the rock. Soon a deep sleep came over her, and her sorrows were forgotten. While she slept, Cupid was looking down at her, and at his bidding Zephyr lifted her up gently and carried her away to lay her down upon a bed of lilies in the valley. While she slept, beautiful dreams wafted through her mind. She woke feeling happy, she did not know why, and getting to her feet, began to walk towards a beautiful palace made of ivory and gold. A little timidly, she stepped into the palace and passed from room to room without coming to the end of the wonders there. Out of the silence a voice said in her ear, "Everything you see is yours, so enjoy the palace and its contents as if it were your own home." There was a table set with every delicacy, forks and spoons of gold, and unseen fingers played music upon the harp. When evening came, a great calm came over Psyche, and she heard someone say, "Place this veil upon your head, for you are to be a bride." And a golden veil descended upon her, covering her face. Then a cake was put into her hand, and the same voice said, "Eat half of this cake, and I will eat the other half." She did so with trembling fingers, and she saw that the rest of the cake had vanished. "Now listen to what I say," she heard the voice again. "You are now my wife, and you will live in this palace with me as long as you live. But one word of warning, your sisters may find you here, and if they come, do not tell them anything about this ceremony, for their love can turn to hate very quickly out of jealousy." Psyche nodded and promised that she would do as her unseen husband decreed. But after a few weeks of bliss, she began to feel unhappy at being without friends of her own age, and sometimes cried beside the fountain. One evening she felt her husband's fingers stroking her hair, asking, "What makes you so unhappy, my dear?" "It is because I miss my sisters and my friends," she answered, and continued, "Could I not see my sisters, even for a little while? After all, I have not been devoured by any monster. They might like to know what has happened to me." There was silence for a few moments. Then the voice said, "I am afraid that ill may come of your wish, but if you remember what I told you and do not tell them everything, I am happy for you to invite your sisters here." Psyche was overjoyed and promised to tell them nothing. "Then tomorrow," said he, "I shall tell my servant Zephyr to carry them here." And next morning Zephyr found her sisters seated on the rock, beating their breasts and crying. Suddenly they found themselves wafted gently to the palace where Psyche was sitting. Soon they were laughing together, and the great table was groaning with food and silver, and they ate till they could eat no more. "Now tell us what happened to you after you were left on that dreadful rock," asked the eldest sister. And the other enquired, "Where is your husband, and who is he?" Their growing suspicion boded no good for Psyche, and she began to be afraid for her secret. "Oh, he goes out hunting a lot," she said. "I would like you to come into the treasure room with me and choose some presents." The sight of so much gold and so many jewels and precious objects turned their heads completely. The gifts they were given were of immense value, and when Zephyr bore the girls away, unknown to them, Psyche felt that she did not want to see her sisters again for quite some time. "You told them nothing, I hope?" asked her husband that night. "For they could be plotting your downfall, you know." "No, I remembered what you said, husband, and indeed I was glad to see them go, for they have become very jealous of me," said Psyche. "Good," said he, sighing. "For the present moment all seems well, but be careful that you do not let them know the true state of affairs, or much ill fortune will come to us." "I promise you," said Psyche, "I will never tell them. Let them come again, and I will show you how I can be silent." So the sisters came again, Psyche wanting to show her husband that he could trust her completely. At first the other two girls behaved as if they were glad of their sister's good fortune. Then one said, "Oh, dearest sister, I've been so worried about you and the dreadful thing which had happened to you that I can scarcely speak." "Why, what do you mean?" asked Psyche, trembling. Her blood ran cold when she saw the look on their faces. "Tell me, and do not beat about the bush. What is it?" "Your husband, dear sister, who is he? Where is he from? From where does he get all this treasure? My dear, believe us, we are only thinking of your own good." And the two sisters began to wring their hands. Psyche shook her elder sister's arm and said, "Tell me, what have you heard about my husband?" "We have it on the very best authority," said her sister, "that your husband is not as you think, but a huge and poisonous snake which is full of venom. People working in the fields have seen it swimming across the river. Believe us, we would not like to tell you this, but—" Psyche recoiled with horror. "It is true I have never yet seen my husband's face," she cried. "He warned me that if ever I were to look upon him, he would be forced to abandon me forever. And yet he is always so gentle to me." "We have something here to help you see his true form," the sisters chorused, placing a small oil lamp into Psyche's hand. "Tonight, when he is asleep, light this and look upon that dreadful face. Then you can happily return with us and be free of him." They both embraced her and were wafted home on the wings of Zephyr. Left alone, Psyche wept, and for hours tried to subdue her misery. When at last her husband came in, she managed to hide her deceit. So well did she feign happiness that he did not suspect anything was wrong as she welcomed him. Soon he was asleep by her side. For a few moments Psyche wondered whether she dare light the lamp or not, then felt that she had to know. She leaned over the bed and held the flame close to him. Instead of the dreadful monster she had expected, there was the most beautiful of all the gods, Cupid himself. At this sight, Psyche started, and a drop of burning oil fell on Cupid's shoulder. He woke and looked at her reproachfully. He turned and would have flown away, but Psyche grabbed his leg and was borne up with him into the air till she fell to the ground and fainted away. Then, after she had regained consciousness, she spent a long time searching and calling for her husband, weeping and begging him to return. Wandering through the country one day, she came to a temple, where she saw sheaves of oats, ears of corn, and scythes all scattered in wild confusion. Attempting to bring some order to the chaos, she began to tidy the place, and then she heard a loud voice from afar. "Unhappy girl, you have brought down the wrath of the goddess Aphrodite on your head. Go, leave this temple in case you also draw down on me the fury of the goddess." Not knowing where her feet would lead her, Psyche wandered on, still searching and crying. At last she was tracked down by one of Aphrodite's servants, who took her to the sacred presence of the goddess herself. Here she was whipped and beaten, and was made to separate a large heap of seeds of all kinds, wheat, millet, barley. The task seemed to be hopeless, but Aphrodite left her to do it, under strict instructions from the goddess to put each of them in an individual pile. As she sat and wept, a tiny ant came, and seeing her plight, brought all his brothers, and by nightfall every grain was sorted and in its own bag. Psyche waited, trembling with fear, for Aphrodite to enter the room. When she did enter, Aphrodite was seized with anger and cried, "Wretched girl, it is not through your own labour that this has been done. Now in yonder glade there are some sheep whose coats are as bright as gold and as soft as silk. Tomorrow morning at dawn I want you to go out there, shear them, and bring in enough wool to make me a robe. And this time I do not think you will have any help." So saying, she disappeared. Next day, very early, Psyche went out to the glade and looked into the clear waters of the river. A reed sang to her, "O Psyche, fear nothing. The sheep must be shorn at evening, for during the day you will not be able to catch them. When they lie exhausted, you can gather all the wool you need from the branches of the shrubs and the hedges through which they have been rushing wildly all day." So Psyche did as the reed told her, and waited till the cool of the evening, and gathered enough wool for the goddess. But when she gave it to Aphrodite, she was greeted with scowls of rage, and ordered to go to the top of a lofty mountain to fill an urn from a fountain of black water. The urn was of finest crystal, and Psyche carried it up most carefully in case she should drop it. But when she got there, she found the fountain was guarded by 2 terrible dragons. She would have started back without the water, had not a giant eagle taken the vessel from her hand and filled it, telling the dragons that Aphrodite needed the precious water to add fresh luster to her beauty. Joyfully the eagle brought Psyche the precious urn filled with the black water, and she gave it to the goddess. But still Aphrodite was not satisfied. Each time she was given new tasks and errands, birds and beasts helped her, and the goddess was quite frustrated in her desire to destroy Psyche. If Cupid had only known that Psyche was suffering so many privations, he would have somehow contrived to save her, but the wound where the boiling oil had fallen took a long time to heal. At last, when it was completely healed, he visited Psyche, and she was overjoyed at the sound of his voice. She poured out all the story of her sufferings, and Cupid was grieved for her. He said, "Your punishment has been more than a mortal ought to be asked to endure, and though I am not able to save you from my mother's wrath, I will fly to Mount Olympus and beseech the gods to grant you forgiveness." And so he did. In the fullness of time, Psyche was rescued from her trials on earth and left the world of humans to sit among the immortals on Mount Olympus, forever immortal herself.